to India Global on NDTV World. I am your host Rica Roy. Over the next hour, we'll get you all the global news that impacts India. First up, here are the headlines. India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri meets Wang in Beijing. China and India should work for mutual ties, say Wang. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar to visit UAE from January 27 to 29. IMEC, Gaza truce. Strengthening ties are all in focus. US-Colombia showdown over deportations. Colombia backs down after Trump tariffs a threat. Indian origin Canada MP barred from PM race. Legitimacy of Canada PM race is under question, says Chandra Arya. Ex-IMF Director Surjit Bhalla on India-US ties. Under Trump, he says that Trump's return is good for Indian investment. Welcome, and here's the top story. In an effort to further restore ties, India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri is in Beijing, where he met Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, with talks focusing on implementing the consensus on the Ladakh border issue, strengthening bilateral dialogue and enhancing political, economic and people-to-people relations. While the Chinese Foreign Ministry highlighted the alignment of bilateral ties with the interests of two nations, Misri acknowledged the progress made under the Kazan consensus and underlined India's commitment to resolving the differences and promoting practical cooperation.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri in Beijing on Monday, an indication that China and India are restoring a mechanism to enhance dialogue and work on specific issues. The resumption of this bilateral mechanism flows from the agreement at the leadership level to discuss the next steps for India-China relations, including the political, economic and people-to-people domains.
当然是我们在龙年接待的最后一批客人。
You are the last delegation of foreign guests we are receiving, but I believe that they will signal a new beginning. Welcome again. I wish you success in your consultation. I believe that you and your counterpart will reach common understandings which will help recover and improve our bilateral ties.
We are on our way to stabilizing the relationship. I cannot overemphasize the importance of communications between our two countries, and I would like to specifically record the contribution that you personally have made in maintaining these communications at various levels between our two leaderships.
Wang Yi said that China and India should seize the opportunity to move towards each other and achieve mutual success, rather than be suspicious, alienate, and consume each other. Vikram Misri agreed that the two countries should properly manage and resolve differences and promote the restart of practical cooperation in various fields. He said that India is willing to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations and to fully support China's work as the SCO chair. Data shows that China overtook the US as India's top trading partner in the 2024 fiscal year, with the value of bilateral trade reaching over $118 billion. Liu Jiaxin from CGTN for NDTV in Beijing.
Well, that was a report from CGTN. We are joined at this hour from Beijing by Einar Tanjin, who's the chairman of Asia Narratives. It's a channel based out of Beijing. And we are also joined by Professor Avinash Godbole. He is a China expert. Well, I'll start my discussion with Mr. Tanjin. Given that both sides are, increasing talks and working on restoring trust, what do you think is the next phase in this relationship?
Thank you for having me. I think putting this in perspective, you have two of the largest countries in the world who are neighbors. They have an unresolved border area, and they also, China's growth has in many ways been spreading into areas that were traditionally areas of influence by India. So these neighbors have to come together if there's going to be an Asian century. And going next is trying to figure out exactly how each feels about the future. Economically, obviously, as you said in the report earlier, China has become the #1 trade partner for India, but it has to go both ways. And right now, India is looking for ways to increase its trade with China, and I think that has to be something that happens in the future, as well as settling this idea that they are rivals. There should be more cooperation.
Mr. Godbole, Vikram Misri had been an ambassador to China. How easy would it be to have him do these negotiations?
It will be difficult. Negotiating with Chinese is not easy, irrespective of where you have been. But the vocabulary of Chinese diplomacy, Mr. Misri would be perfectly familiar. I'm only curious about the timing of this event happening today, because this week is supposed to be a holiday week in China, given the New Year is around the corner. Everything else is shut. So this must be a very quickly planned meeting with some time horizon action there. But I understand it's not easy to negotiate with China at any stage. Now, if they had planned this well in advance, I think we are at the 12th week of the agreement on de-escalation. So they would have set certain guidelines on where we are supposed to have been. But to my knowledge, the de-induction of troops, as was expected, has not even begun as yet. So we have to see what signals and what statements we have from our government at the end of the day, or maybe by afternoon tomorrow, about what transpired exactly in Beijing.
Mr. Tangent, would you like to remark on the timing of the event?
Well, I think the elephant in the room is somebody named Donald Trump. Obviously, his moves to say he wants to take over the Panama Canal, Canada, and also Greenland, as well as, even today, his decision to play hardball with Colombia. I think this has had some repercussions. There's some feeling among China experts that India suspects that the U.S. Interfered in the president and the prime minister elections, and that they had some hand in Bangladesh. This has led to some bad feelings between Washington and New Delhi. The fact that India has opened its ports to Russian shadow tankers and is the #1 buyer of oil, and has been supplying Russia with things that the U.S. sees as sensitive. I'm not saying that India is walking away from the U.S. relations, but I think it's making it clear that India is an independent country and will make its own decisions about who it deals with. Washington, of course, was very anxious to have India act as a doorstop to China. I think it's better for those two countries to work together rather than be a divide and conquer part of some sort of colonial past plan.
Mr. Godbole, Trump will insist India to be more proactive inside Quad, giving it a more military bent. How will this impact ties with Beijing?
Well, our ties with Beijing are already at a low. And if you saw the press release from the government of India, it had focused on 3 specific issues: economic, political, and people-to-people exchanges. So trade balance is an issue, and trade and investment, that barriers that India had put after the crisis in 2020, that would have been discussed. Second is the issue of resumption of bilateral flights. We don't have bilateral flights between India and China since 2020. It stopped during COVID, but the restoration never happened because of the bilateral border crisis being at the center of the relations. And the third is people-to-people relations, including the status of students, the status of social interaction of exchanges between think tanks and academia and industries. Visa issuance has been at all-time low. So I believe that is also kind of is to be restored. And the fourth point would be media. Accreditation of Indian media and Chinese media had been revoked after the 2020 crisis again, and on the reporting of COVID by some of the Indian media, and I'm sure that issue also would have been discussed. So yes, Trump will be a huge shadow, but it will take a Herculean effort to restore India-China relations trust. This is also supposed to be the year of the 75th anniversary of establishing diplomatic relations, and we'll have to see
Right.
what outcome this highlights on this issue.
Mr. Tangent, could China's largest dam project on the Brahmaputra threaten India's security and become another contentious point?
Well, I'm glad you raised that. I mean, there are a couple of misconceptions. The amount of water that flows from China into that area, by the Indian government's estimate, was less than 7%. As we all know, that as warm air rises against cold mountains, it sheds all of its or most of its water. So, the water is really on the Indian side. India had planned in 2017 the Siang Upper Multi-Purpose Project Reservoir, which is a dam, India's largest water electricity project. China in 2021 responded with a dam on its side of the border. The real issue, though, is that they have to work together in terms of sharing information, because this has a huge impact on Bangladesh. They get 65% of their water from this waterway, and the silt that washes downstream is an important nutrient for all the farms that are in that delta region.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Tangent and Mr. Godbole, for joining me on the broadcast this evening. With that, time for a very tiny break on the show. More on the other side. Stay tuned. Pushing India's outreach to the Gulf, Foreign Minister Jaishankar began a 3-day visit to UAE to further enhance India's competitive strategic partnership with the influential Gulf nation. This will be Jaishankar's 11th visit to the nation since 2019 and comes weeks after the UAE Crown Prince visited New Delhi. During Jaishankar's trip, the two sides are also expected to review the situation in Gaza following the coming into force of the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. I'm joined by my colleague Mohammad Ghazali for more on this story. Ghazali, what will be the focus of the visit of Mr. Jaishankar?
See, right now the ultimate focus which appears to be during this trip would be the current ongoing situation in Middle East, particularly the ceasefire which has been achieved between Israel and Hamas in Gaza Strip, and the humanitarian situation there, because India is also one of the stakeholders which has been providing constant aid to not just Gaza Strip or people in Gaza Strip, but it also has been providing aid to people in Lebanon, with whom Israel had a ceasefire as well. So it appears now that in this particular situation, India will try to have an update on the ongoing situation in Gaza, because the stakeholders there are also discussing that how Gaza should be rebuilt. Mr. Trump has given a very, what the Arab leaders are calling a very outrageous plan, because Mr. Trump was quoted saying that perhaps he wants the residents of Gaza to either be shifted to Egypt or Jordan or any other Middle Eastern country. Indonesia was also under discussion, which the Arab countries have sort of rejected the plan. So Dr. Jaishankar being there will certainly be made aware of, or he will try to get to know things about the updated situation in Gaza. Besides that, UAE also happens to be one of our key partners in Middle East. It is also one of our largest trading partner. And more importantly, the IMEC corridor, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, European corridor, which was an ambitious plan conceptualized during the G20 when it was held in India. UAE happens to be the first stop or first leg of that entire project, but it all came to a halt after October 7, 2023, when the war broke out between Hamas and Israel. And now perhaps since the ceasefire has been achieved in that region, India will also try to discuss that with UAE, because both are stakeholders of that project. That project has to start from India. India will also be involved in laying the largest rail network in that desert region in the Arab region there, and UAE being one of the first leg of the project. So all these developments are connected to each other, and that is what perhaps will be discussed when Dr. Jaishankar will be there for the next 3 days in UAE.
Right. Thank you very much, Ghazali, for getting us all those details. At this hour, I'm also joined by Dr. Shubhra Chaudhary, founder of Middle East Insights platform. Dr. Chaudhary, this is Jaishankar's 11th visit. Why is India constantly reaching out to the Middle East?
India has to reach out to the Middle East, most of the countries. In fact, in UAE, we have 3.5 million diaspora, massive amount of remittance. At the same time, I agree with Ghazali sir in respect to IMEC, but I2U2 and the emancipation of Abraham Accords are also in the line in terms of how Trump is going to further create financial, economic, social cohesion within the Middle East for Israel in the coming days. It is supposedly in talks that Trump will meet Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu, in the mid of February. Defense Secretary of US Pete Hegseth, he was the first call that he made after being sworn in was to Netanyahu. Now, turning to why it is important for India. UAE is a partner for IMEC, but UAE is also a partner in the BRI. So from Middle East and the Indo-Pacific, India has to play a very, very delicate balance of maintaining the status quo, but at least at the same time having a dehyphenated approach towards its own foreign policy. Dr. Jaishankar, in his recent visit in Spain, mentioned that there are very few countries, which I completely agree with. There are very few countries in the world that can actually talk with both Iran and Israel or talk with both Russia and Ukraine. That brings India to a very unique platform. At the same time, UAE is very dependent on us in terms of food security.
Right. How will
And
yeah. How will the regional stability impact relationships, and what kind of role is India expected to play in the region?
India, normally it feels as if, that India is an outsider geographically. But if you look at the amount of soldiers that we have lost in UN peacekeeping missions, especially 2 of them just last month, in total 179 we have lost Indian Army men in UN peacekeeping forces. So that is one primary impact that India can have. India gives massive humanitarian aid to Gaza.
Right.
India is also very strongly, there are 85,000 Indian Jews in Israel. We have investments in the Haifa port. So this makes India at a very, very peculiar place, which China doesn't have as of now. To have a certain kind of reconciliation. Also, it must be understood that when Prime Minister Modi visited UAE in 2015, it was after 34 years when an Indian Prime Minister actually visited UAE. 34 years. So our foreign policy in the Gulf is very important. At the same time, we should have a look at Prime Minister Modi went to Kuwait. Now, Kuwait and UAE are having very strong bilateral dialogues. In fact, February 3rd is designated as in Kuwait UAE Day. That is very important if you look at the trail of the visits that we are doing. At the same time, Paytm is also looking to start off in UAE, in Singapore. Recently, we also had 40 Indian women entrepreneurs receiving training in UAE. And Dr. Jaishankar is going to speak at Abu Dhabi at the Raisina Hill Dialogues. There's a massive leverage that India has in terms of the non-aligned, yet a multi-vector approach that we can adopt. And most of the Middle East countries cannot ignore it anyway.
Right. Thank you very much for getting us all those details. We'll, of course, closely track the region with you. After a fiery showdown, the US and Colombia walked away from the brink of a trade war after the White House said the South American nation had agreed to accept military aircraft carrying deported migrants. US President Donald Trump had threatened tariffs and sanctions to Colombia to punish it for earlier refusing to accept military flights carrying deportees as part of his sweeping immigration crackdown. Take a look at this report to understand why Trump's opening move should worry Washington's allies and enemies alike.
The golden age of America begins right now.
Less than a week back in the White House, and US President Donald Trump has already taken on his first trade war with an unlikely suspect, Colombia, one of Washington's close allies. In a forceful move, President Donald Trump threatened the South American nation with tariffs and visa sanctions after Colombian President Gustavo Petro barred two US military deportation flights from landing in the country. In a post on Truth Social, President Donald Trump announced that President Gustavo had denied two flights with who he called illegal criminals to land in Colombia, jeopardizing US national security. As punishment, Trump vowed swift and punishing retaliation, imposing tariffs on all Colombian goods and more. The US president cracked down against Colombia, ordering a 25% tariff that would be raised to 50% after 1 week on all goods coming into the US from Colombia. He also announced a travel ban and immediate visa revocation for Colombian government officials and their allies, visa sanctions on Colombian authorities and their relatives, and enhanced customs inspection on travelers and cargo from Colombia. Hitting back at Trump's aggressive measure, President Petro sought to hit back, saying US cannot treat Colombian migrants as criminals, and threatened to impose his own tariffs on US products. However, the fiery face-off was short-lived. By the end of a volatile Sunday, the Colombian leader had backed down, agreeing to accept the deported migrants.
Comunicado oficial. El gobierno de Colombia informa que hemos superado el impasse con el gobierno de los Estados Unidos, recibiendo a los colombianos y a las colombianas que retornen en condición de deportados, garantizándoles las condiciones dignas como ciudadanos sujetos de derecho.
While US and Colombia have now pulled back from the brink of a trade war, with the White House saying it will not go ahead with tariffs on Colombia, the move serves as a warning. If you don't cooperate with the US, the consequences will be severe. US allies and adversaries alike must be prepared, because from the looks of it, this is just Trump's opening move. With Disha Bagchi, Gargi Rawat for NDTV World.
Time for a very tiny break on the show. More on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Indo-Canadian MP Chandra Arya has been barred from participating in the race to select the next leader of the ruling Liberal Party. In the wake of the communication from the party, the three-term MP said the decision raised questions about the legitimacy of the leadership race. In fact, Arya was aiming to run to be the next Prime Minister of Canada after PM Justin Trudeau announced his decision to resign. The Liberal MP had promised to lead a small, more efficient government to rebuild the nation and secure prosperity for the future generations. Arya, who was the first to announce his candidacy to replace Prime Minister Trudeau, said he is waiting on official communication from the Liberals and is considering his next steps. Former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland and former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney are widely seen as the frontrunners. Meanwhile, former Indo-Canadian MP Ruby Dhalla has announced that she will participate in the leadership race of the ruling Liberal Party to succeed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Well, let me go over to my guests to discuss this at this hour. I will be joined on the show by Terry Milevsky, who is a retired senior correspondent with CBC. We'll also be joined by Tara Karta in a bit. But let me go over to Mr. Milevsky. Sir, you know, the fact that Chandra Arya has said that it casts aspersions on the legitimacy of the race. What do you have to say on that?
Well, he's, in a way, this is a rather unfair way to do it, to kick him out of the race without giving reasons. But I assume that during the course of the day, it's still early morning here in Ottawa, that those reasons will be communicated by the party. At least they better be, otherwise they'll look pretty silly. The problem, of course, as everyone has known from the start with Mr. Arya's campaign, and I speak as one of his constituents, he's my MP here in Ottawa, is that he doesn't speak French, not at all. And that is an essential element for anyone running, for any party leadership in Canada. People were very surprised that he ran. Not only did he run without speaking French at all, but he went on the CBC and said that he didn't think that that was important to people in Quebec. Well, that's nonsense, of course. The Quebecers have been fighting to maintain their language as one of Canada's two official languages for decades now, and they have succeeded in establishing that nobody's going to run and win if they don't speak French. So he could only have hogged airtime, taken time away from more prominent candidates that the party is trying to promote as a potential prime minister, a winner in the next election, some way of pulling the fat out of the fire and getting the Liberals back on track to get re-elected, but they didn't want airtime and attention being bled away from the leading candidates by somebody who didn't even speak French. I think it's as simple as that.
Well, there are lots of reports that he's been pulled out due to public statements and past improper conduct. Would you say not speaking French and then, going to television channels and other media platforms and claiming that he isn't fluent with French is something that will be considered as improper conduct by the party?
Well, yes, I think the party considers it to be disqualifying. I mean, you can't just write off, more than 70 parliamentary seats in Quebec, and this would be his candidacy if he were to win. The Liberal leadership would be regarded, I think, as a bit of a joke in Quebec, notwithstanding the fact that Mr. Arya is a serious person, and he has also rubbed some people up the wrong way because, as you know, all the Canadian political parties have been playing nice, shall we say, with Khalistani elements which are prominent in Canada, and Arya is an exception who has stood up foursquare against them. So he has made some friends among the Indo-Canadian community, but not with the Khalistani minority. And so I think that because he stirred up trouble on that score, he has clashed, for example, with another fellow Liberal backbench MP, Suk Dhaliwal, who is at present peddling an absurd petition trying to get Parliament to blame India for blowing up Air India Flight 182 in 1985, the Kanishka bombing. And Chandra Arya would have none of it. He stood up against that. And so I think he's antagonized some people in the party who want to keep the alliance with the Khalistanis going and don't want to talk about it too much.
Mark Carney has received public support from 52 Liberal MPs compared to 26 for Chrystia Freeland. Do you think he is in a pole position right now?
Yes, I think that you can tell from that. It's a very new race. It's being run on a very accelerated schedule. And for people to be flocking to his side suggests that he's going to run away with this and that Chrystia Freeland is simply considered to be too close to Trudeau. If this is to be a change election, which is what most people say, the pollsters all say that the voters want it, they're looking for change. They don't want somebody who has been so closely allied with Justin Trudeau, notwithstanding that Chrystia Freeland has been saying that she's new and she's different and she's going to lead the change. Well, she's been joined at the hip to Trudeau ever since the Liberals were elected in 2015. She's been the Minister of Everything. She's been his Deputy Prime Minister, his Foreign Minister, Finance Minister, you name it. She's been the Minister of Everything and a very valued member of the government, always seen at Trudeau's right hand. So people don't want that. They want to turn from that. So they want an outsider, and Carney is running as a real outsider, not a fake one.
Mr. Milevsky, do you think Ruby Dhalla can shake up the Canada PM's race?
I doubt it. I think that she's looking for attention, as Mr. Arya was, as politicians do. a lot of people do run in order to get some FaceTime on TV. You know, backbench members of parliament or former members of parliament don't get much attention. And this is one way to do it. And that's one reason why the party has said no to Mr. Arya, poor fellow. You know, as I said at the beginning, it's not necessarily fair, but who said politics has to be fair? I think Ruby Dalla is certainly a credible candidate, but I think that she's going to be in it mainly to position herself for the next election.
Mr. Milevsky, I barely have time for one last question. Let me ask you, is Donald Trump's tariff threats shaping this race for Prime Minister's office?
To some degree, yes. There's no doubt about it. Because all of the parties are seized with this. What are we going to do? This could devastate the Canadian economy if he goes all the way. And even those who say, no, it's just about, you know, this is typical Trump. His bark is worse than his bite, and he's not going to go all the way, and he'll only beat us up a little instead of a lot. So what they're looking for is a firm stand. Canadians are pretty well united, the polls say, around the idea which all the candidates espouse, that we've got to retaliate with dollar-for-dollar tariffs, aiming to hit the Americans where it hurts, in districts where Mr. Trump's donors and supporters and cabinet members live, to make sure they feel the pain, because a lot of the pain from these tariffs is going to fall on the Americans.
And what kind of ties will really India be looking to have with Canada when its new Prime Minister comes in?
Well, I mean, I think there's room for a cooling of tensions between India and Canada. I think there's room now, you know, taking the Modi-Trudeau, there you see them pretending to be getting along when you and I both know, no, they didn't get along one bit. The absence of Trudeau is certainly going to lower the temperature. I don't think it means that there's going to be a solution. I don't think it means that Canada is going to withdraw, even if it could. The police allegations, and they are allegations by Canada's federal police force, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, not by politicians. They're not politically engineered. The charges that the Modi government was involved in the murder of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, in 23. I don't think that's going to disappear, but I do think the two sides may find a way to talk again and perhaps to restore, to some degree, their diplomatic relations. I hope so. And then that way lies a way forward to perhaps a negotiated solution.
Also, given that Canada has a very large expat Indian community, what kind of favors would India, the government of India, be looking for or expecting from the new Canadian government for them?
Well, the Indian side, let's face it, has been asking for decades now, for at least 40 years since I've been covering this story. They've been asking for Canada, and the US for that matter, and the UK, but mainly Canada, to take seriously India's national security concerns. They repeatedly put forward, the Indians that is, they repeatedly put forward, we want the return of these people, a long named list of what they allege are Khalistani terrorists, as India designates them as terrorists, and Canada routinely refuses on the grounds that the evidence is insufficient, and that what Canada calls a terrorist is somebody exercising their free speech and not doing any violence in the Canadian view. So they're going to have to reach an accommodation on that. Canada's going to have to give something in order to get in the door with the Indians, but I think the Indians also will look. They have so many thousands Indian students, for example, who want to study in Canada and are having trouble with visas and all of that kind of thing. Both sides will want to have a cooling of tensions and a rapprochement, even though it may be difficult to negotiate, it won't be impossible.
Mr. Milevsky, there being a lot of confusion over the H-1B visa right now. Do you think that will also help Canada to attract a large number of Indians, a huge Indian traffic towards their country?
It's a good question. It won't hurt, will it? It seems to me obvious that Indian students, shall we say, are voting with their feet. They want to take advantage of the comparatively lower education costs and the relatively good quality of the education that they can get, the qualifications that they can come away with in Canada. And both sides India wants those well-educated engineers and scientists to come back from, say, learning at one of the best tech schools, university in Waterloo in Ontario. They want those people to come back to India, and those that stay in Canada and work here, Canada's glad to have them. So it's a talent stream for both countries that should be made healthy again, instead of having obstacles and delays because of this diplomatic spat. That's why I think both sides, or one reason anyway, why both sides I think will want to sweep away these obstacles. It won't be fast and it won't be easy, but I think it has to happen.
Jerry Milevsky, thank you very much for joining us on the broadcast this evening and sharing your views. Time for a very tiny break on the show. There's more on the other side. Don't go away. Welcome back. Tens of thousands of Palestinians streamed into the most heavily destroyed part of the Gaza Strip on Monday as Israel lifted its closure of the north for the first time since the early weeks of the 15-month war with Hamas, in accordance with a fragile ceasefire. Under the ceasefire agreement, they were allowed to enter via two north-south highways crossing the Netzarim corridor, an Israeli military zone. The opening was delayed for 2 days over a dispute between Hamas and Israel, which said the militant group had changed the order of the hostages it released in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. I'm joined by Melissa Weiss, Executive Editor at Jewish Insider, for more on the story. Melissa, this is a pretty significant moment for the Palestinians to cross over through the northern border. A part, it seems, have been heavily destroyed, isn't it?
Yeah, which is, essentially what happens when a group such as Hamas has been given 15 years to build a really developed infrastructure in which, homes and hospitals and schools and UN facilities have all been turned into to military installations. And so the people of North Gaza are returning to an area that will have to be rebuilt, likely with the support from a number of Arab countries that are likely to pledge support for the rebuilding of Gaza in an eventual day after scenario.
Melissa, we are playing out those pictures of migration right now. Seems thousands and thousands of people are crossing over. Where are they going? Where are they going to stay?
It's a very good question, and it is something for the all of the different countries that are going to be playing a role in the day after to figure out. It is likely that they will not be staying in the long term in this area until there is housing, until there are structures that are being built. Some are returning to their homes to retrieve their belongings. Others will go and set up temporary shelters. So the rebuilding will take quite a long time. And remember, the war is not over. This is a temporary ceasefire in the hope that we are eventually getting to the end of this war, but the war is not over.
And what does it really mean that the Israeli forces are still in that territory that we are seeing right now, hundreds and thousands of Palestinians returning home?
It means that we are in phase one of a three-phase deal. As a part of phase one, the Israeli military is not fully withdrawing from Gaza. Remember, this takes goodwill on both sides, and what we've seen repeatedly over the last week and a half is that Hamas has violated the terms of the agreement. First, in not providing the hostages who were supposed to be released per the terms of the deal, and now in not providing a list of who is alive and who is dead to the Israeli authorities. The ball is really in Hamas's court. If they want this war to end, like the Palestinians do, like many Israelis do, they can abide by the terms of the agreement.
Melissa, it's an interesting phase in the history of the world and the history of the region, because often we talk about migration. This, what we are seeing, is reverse migration, but they are going back to an area they are not sure of making a future in.
Listen, I think Israelis and Palestinians alike would love nothing more than to see Gaza be as booming economically and socially as we are here, just miles away. There's no reason that the shores of the Gaza Strip cannot look like the shores of Israel, cannot look like Tel Aviv, cannot look like Herzliya, cannot look like major Israeli cities. There's enormous opportunity for this enclave that is on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. There is so much opportunity here. The question really comes down to, what future do the Palestinians want for themselves? And when you think about it that way, Hamas, which is still the government in Gaza, continues to pledge to wage war against Israel. And I think that as long as you have a government that is committed to waging war against a neighbor, then Palestinians aren't going to be able to reap the benefits of this beautiful land and to build on it and to be prosperous. And so it's really a question of what the Palestinians want for their future. And if they want a future that is economically booming, if they want a beautiful coastline, if they want tourism, if they want their children to thrive, there's a really easy way of going about that, and that is moving beyond a government that is controlled by a group that does not want those things.
Melissa Weiss, thank you very much for getting us those wise words on the television, and what we are showing our viewers at this are those pictures of Palestinians going back home in a day and age when we constantly talk about migration. Migration is one of the headlines of a regular news bulletin. These are the pictures of reverse migration. Speaking at the Indian High Commission in Dhaka, Indian envoy to Bangladesh, Pranay Verma, said both nations are important stakeholders in peace and development of Bay of Bengal, saying that India's partnership with Bangladesh must benefit people on both sides. The envoy's comments come as Dhaka continues to pressure India to extradite former PM Sheikh Hasina to face trial in Bangladesh, and is now also probing Hasina's daughter Saima Wazid, pushing for her removal from WHO. Listen into what Pranay Verma had to say.
Bangladesh has been an important partner for us, joined by shared history and geography, linked by common language, culture and traditions, and connected emotionally by the shared sacrifices of the liberation war. As a neighbor to whom we take a long-term view of our relations, our ties with Bangladesh derive strength from our belief that our peace, security, progress and prosperity are interlinked.
With US President Donald Trump back in the White House, India is focused on Washington's next moves. NDTV's Gauri Dwivedi spoke to former IMF Director Surjit Bhalla on where India-US ties are headed under Trump 2.0. Listen in.
How do you see the US-India business relationship given Donald Trump is now in power? He's known for striking deals. He has a very favorable view of India. Where do you see that going, and what kind of a transformation it could mean from an economic point of view for India?
I think I have commented on this before, and I think it can only be good for India. Let me explain why Trump will be good for much of the reasons that you've said. Is that he's transactional. We are transactional. India is transactional. Every country is transactional. And it's not that Trump has ideas to increase India's growth rate, to increase India's investment, to better India's infrastructure. Okay? He doesn't. But, there's an old line, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. And that's where, because of that pressure, we will be able to do the right thing. And the right thing is not unknown. It is You've got to open up investment. Okay, so already you must have seen in the news this morning, he put on a 25% tariff on Colombia and then reached a deal with them. So that no longer is going to be the case because they reached a deal on
illegal immigrants, they
illegal
have to go,
immigrants.
yes.
And we've already reached a deal
Yeah.
with them on illegal immigrants. But I think the India issue will have to do a little bit more than agreeing on illegal immigrants. Remember that 2019, when Trump was there, our trade deals got distorted because, or didn't happen with the US, because of tariffs on Harley-Davidson. We refused. कि भाई हम भी motorcycle बना सकते हैं. ठीक है भाई, बनाओ. So I think that's where.
Do you think this time around a free trade agreement will be signed?
I think, look, I hate to think, I can't, so that's why I'm very optimistic for what will happen on February 1st. That it will be a budget with a difference, not business as usual.
What would be your wish list for the budget this time? Because you feel it's really going to be a transformative one.
First, change our FDI policy. I'm not giving it in any order, but since we just finished talking about that. Second, cut personal income tax rates. Third, there was a story, as we were discussing, in a major international bank has said that India needs to cut corporate taxes. So, now think about it. Who will the cut in corporate taxes benefit? Not you, not me, not anybody in the audience, but corporates. They are the last people who need a tax cut. We, the people, need a tax cut. So, I don't know, this is the operation of the Babu Industrial Complex already at work. That they're saying, honestly, I've not heard anybody except this morning talk about a corporate tax cut. We had that in 2019. It was hugely successful. And now we need a cut in personal income taxes. So FDI and a cut in personal income taxes would be my two major recommendations.
Well, with that, a wrap on this bulletin. Thank you for watching.